learning what we as Christians believe and being able to explain to people why we believe it. This is a momentous decision. It is a step which millions of American Christians need to take. Why should you take this step? Well, let me give 3 reasons. Number 1, shaping culture. Shaping culture. We've all heard of the so-called culture war going on in American society. Now, some people may think this sounds militaristic, but the fact is that a tremendous struggle for the soul of America is raging right now. This struggle is not just political. It has a spiritual or religious dimension as well. Secularists are bent on eliminating religion from the public square in American society. The so-called new atheists like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Richard Dawkins go even further. They want to exterminate religious belief entirely from American society. American culture has already become post-Christian. Belief in a sort of generic God is still the norm, but it has become politically incorrect to believe in Jesus Christ. Just ask yourself, how many films coming out of Hollywood have you seen that portray Christians in a positive light? How many times instead do we find Christians portrayed as shallow, bigoted, villainous hypocrites? What's the public perception of Bible-believing Christians in our culture today? Well, take a look at this cartoon. I hope this cartoon makes you angry. It depicts so accurately the perception of Bible-believing Christians by the cultural elite in American society today. Goofy curiosities. But notice, Christians are not just funny, they're also dangerous. Caution, the sign says. They mustn't be allowed positions of influence in society. Maybe that's why they even need to be penned up. So, why should we care about what our culture thinks of us as Christians? Why can't we just be faithful followers of Christ and live for Him in the midst of a culture that is going to hell in a handbasket? Why should we care what the cultural elite think of us as Christians? Why not just preach the gospel to a dark and dying world? Well, the answer is because the gospel is never heard in isolation. The gospel is always heard against the cultural backdrop in which a person was born and raised. A person who was raised in a culture which is sympathetic to the Christian faith will be open to the gospel in a way that a person who is raised in a secular culture will not. For a person who is thoroughly secularized, you may as well tell him to believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy as in Jesus Christ. It will seem that absurd to him. What awaits us in the United States, if our slide into secularism continues, is already evident in Europe. Evangelism is immeasurably more difficult in Europe than it is in the United States. Having lived for 13 years in Europe, where I spoke evangelistically on university campuses across the continent, I can testify to how hard the ground is. It's difficult for the gospel even to get a fair hearing. The United States is following at a distance down this same road, with Canada somewhere in between. If the gospel is to be heard as a viable option for thinking men and women, then we as Christians must try to shape American culture in such a way that Christian belief is an intellectually defensible alternative. It can be done. We are living at a time in history in which Christian philosophy is experiencing an incredible resurgence, at a time at which science is more open to the existence of a creator and designer of the universe than at any time in recent memory. And at a time when biblical scholars have embarked upon a new quest of the historical Jesus and have confirmed the main outline of the portrait of Jesus painted in the Gospels. If only Christian laymen could be informed so as to give good answers to unbelievers' questions and objections, and provide solid reasons for why they believe as they do, then the public perception of Christians in our culture will slowly change. Christians will come to be seen as thoughtful people who deserve to be taken seriously, rather than as emotional fanatics. Becoming a Christian will be a reasonable and attractive option for people. Now, I'm not saying that people will become Christians because of the arguments and the evidence. Rather, I'm saying that the arguments and the evidence can create a culture in which embracing Christian belief is a reasonable thing to do. They create an environment in which people will be open to the gospel. So, being intellectually engaged as a Christian is a vital way of being salt and light in American society today. Number two, strengthening believers. Strengthening believers. The personal benefits of being intellectually engaged with your faith are huge. Let me mention 3 ways in which it will strengthen you as a Christian. First of all, knowing why you believe, as well as what you believe, will make you more confident in sharing your faith with others. I see this happen all the time on the university campuses where I have a public debate with a non-Christian professor. I frequently participate in debates with university professors on topics like, does God exist? Did Jesus rise from the dead? Christianity versus humanism, and so forth. And you know what? I find that most of these professors, though they may be very brilliant in their narrow area of specialization, are almost clueless when it comes to the evidence for Christianity. What I find is that the Christian position in these debates usually comes out so far ahead that the non-believing students on campus often complain that the whole event was a setup, designed or staged to make the non-Christian position look bad. In fact, we try to get the best opponents that we can, and they're often picked by the atheist club on campus. By contrast, Christian students come away from these events with their heads held high, proud to be Christians. One Canadian student remarked to me following a debate, "I can't wait to go out and share my faith in Christ." People who are not trained in the defense of the faith are often afraid to speak out for Christ or to share their faith out of fear that someone will ask them a question. But if you know the answers, then you're not afraid to go into the lion's den. In fact, you'll enjoy it. Being intellectually equipped will help to make you a bold and fearless witness for Jesus Christ.